Thunder students, welcome back. Our second subsection of notes here from section 13, Reagan and the American Resurgence. A little bit of info here over Mr. President Ronald Reagan, pictured here with his lovely wife, Nancy. The study of Reagan, some fascinating stuff because many people think Donald Trump might be our first reality TV star president or a person that swooped in without a lot of political experience. No, sirree. The first one to do that was Ronald Reagan. Now, he did dabble in politics to a substantially larger level than DT prior to ascending to the presidency, all right? But he originally began as a radio broadcaster and then worked into the Hollywood scene. Lo and behold, afterwards, kind of getting into politics in the 1960s and then definitely in the late 60s and early 70s. He was a B-list celebrity in Hollywood back in the day. Popular, okay, but not super popular. All right, popular, but not super popular. He is actually also going to get his first taste of, leadership, all right, in terms of an organization by chairing or being the president of the Screen Actors Guild. And this was a time when Hollywood was under threat to socialist/communist takeover. So Ronald Reagan, who was a big New Deal Democrat, big FDR fan, navigates the Screen Actors Guild in Hollywood through the Red Scare, prevents it from going the way of communism, if you will, and becoming completely tainted and corrupt with it. And that's when he starts to kind of see this political shift in terms of ideology. He's then going to identify as a Barry Goldwater conservative. That's almost a 180, all right, a 180 from being an FDR New Deal Democrat in the 1930s. And he is going to build, he is going to refine his political ideology through the rest of the 1960s, eventually run for and become governor of the state of California with a mixed bag of results, okay? California was in difficult financial situations at that time. He promised that he would, right those wrongs. Was he super successful? No, okay? But he did leave California in a better place than when he inherited it. Also to note, he's going to run for the presidential nomination in 1976. We've mentioned this before. And he's going to come dang close to getting it, almost defeating Gerald R. Ford, who was the sitting president at that time. But he's going to take the next several years to continue to fine-tune his message. And it was a message of limited government. Ronald Reagan was a president that was for a strong military, oozed patriotism and American exceptionalism, basically going back to the history that he himself had lived through. This was a guy that you were not going to keep down on the mat. And probably because of his lack of lifelong political experience, Ronald Reagan was an individual that probably was more idealistic or held true to his values and political ideals than necessarily singularly playing the game of partisan politics. Okay, so when he said he was going to do something, he truly felt and believed that. Often wasn't just lip service to try to ultimately earn enough votes to win. But he probably is running at the right time in American history to be able to champion some of those values and ideals that historically, all right, since he turned Goldwater conservative in the 1960s, he did ooze. That was embedded into his DNA, his fabric of his being. He wanted to cut taxes, all right, keep more money into the American economy through the pockets of Americans, rebuild the United States military, that comes to his foreign policy, and cut government spending and regulation, all right? So he goes back to the days of, being more of a Coolidge or Harding or Hoover when it comes to, laissez-faire economics. Not entirely, but he saw that there was too much stress and strife placed upon the free market and the United States of America through the 1960s and 70s by politicians, and he wanted to open up the economy a little bit more with deregulation by the government. Moving on here to the next slide. Again, probably running at the right time in American history because for the last 20 years, Americans, for the most part, were ran by individuals that treated the presidency as an imperial position, okay? So Reagan is not going to not use it as a bully pulpit, similar to Teddy Roosevelt, but he really did truly believe in, using the position to dial back the level of influence and control the government has. All right. The government was indeed the problem. Okay. The government wasn't needed to solve the problem. It was the problem in the attempt to try to solve all of these problems. Interesting mindset. Okay. Interesting mindset. Definitely different than what many Americans had been campaigning on for the previous 2.5, 3 decades. So that was his domestic mindset. All right. Cut taxes. Okay. Trim government spending. Deregulate. All right. The free market. Give things back to the people in the free market and let that rejuvenate the economy and rejuvenate society, rejuvenate the nation. Foreign policy-wise, he wanted to meddle as much as possible. Reagan was definitely all about increasing the United States military so it could take a firm stance, a strong and supported firm stance with foreign adversaries. He was a Cold War warrior, all right, in terms of his mindset. And he saw the Soviets as the evil empire, refers to them as such, all right, piggybacking off of some Star Wars rhetoric. So there were some critics of Ronald Reagan. Obviously so. More often than not, the media loves government interaction, okay? They love government regulation. It's something for them to cover to, at this time, get people to tune into their broadcast, subscribe to the newspaper, their magazine. So individuals criticized Ronald Reagan thinking that he was inexperienced, he wasn't that intellectual. Here's this, ex-Hollywood B-list celebrity, and he's going to guide the nation through this time of stagnation, through this time of, indecisiveness regarding foreign policy and affairs? Yeah, right. Are you serious? So the media did not like Reagan, okay, and he's chastised. He's celebrated today, but that's a lot of revisionist history. At the time, Reagan got a lot of negative media attention, likened to that of Richard Nixon. So portrayed him as dim-witted and simple. They feared that, again, if he was successful in trying some of his domestic policies, then the media would have to, have an about face and no longer could provide the commentary that they'd like to provide. That is the idea that the government is, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-controlling, and can solve all of your problems. We'll take care of you. So Reagan had an ideology that was naturally adversarial to the vast majority of people that covered the government, okay, and therefore was not well received by the national media while he campaigned in 1980, nor through the first few years of his presidency. Two events are going to immediately benefit, though, Ronald Reagan in his attempt to inject some of this policy in the United States of America early on in 1981. So again, he runs in 1980. He defeats Carter in 1980 by an electoral landslide. It's not a huge difference in the popular vote, but it really never is, okay? Ronald Reagan is going to suffer an assassination attempt, okay, in March of 1981. John David Hinckley. If you ever read Killing Reagan by Bill O'Reilly, fabulous little expose here on John Hinckley Jr., and ultimately just the, unfortunate mental illness that Hinckley possessed and how it ultimately led him to try to do something spectacular to win the love and attention of one Jodie Foster. Not lying. We had a president nearly killed by essentially a mentally ill individual who was just trying to win the love and affection of Jodie Foster. But that is going to give Reagan a certain level of sympathy, political capital, if you will, that's going to get him to get Congress, all right, to enact some of the policy that he wanted to enact. Whereas maybe he wasn't going to be able to do it with the Democratic House of Representatives and the Republican Senate. Remember, the Senate goes Republican in 1980 as well. So he's got a split Congress here. But, hey, the guy just got shot. He's surviving an assassination attempt. All right, we feel sorry. And it's not going to look upon us with our constituents if we don't support this. So, again, it's politics being played here. But one of the biggest contributing factors to Reagan getting some of his policy of deregulation, tax cuts, and cuts in government spending passed early on in his first term, the fact that he survived an assassination attempt. The other is, on Inauguration Day, because he was seen as kind of a wild card when it came to foreign policy, like literally some of the governments and some of the leaders abroad who were anti-American weren't sure what Reagan was going to immediately do and respond, how he was going to respond to them and their anti-American or non-American friendly actions. They were worried. Just case in point, the hostages of the Iranian hostage crisis immediately released upon Reagan's inauguration in January 1981. So right away, even the Ayatollah Khomeini and Iranian leadership goes, all right, we kind of knew what we had with Jimmy Carter, a bit of a paper tiger. American media says Ronald Reagan's going to drop nukes on us. So we better go ahead and release these hostages. They weren't sure what Reagan was going to do. So a little bit of that unknown ends up working to Reagan's favor immediately upon being inaugurated as president. And thankfully, after 444 days, those Americans are returned home. I'd encourage you to look this up. I'll probably link it in the calendar doc. This is the 62nd president over Ronald Reagan. So nice little quick recap of a lot of what I shared with you right now and what we've shared in previous subsections. We covered this a little bit in section 12 for the 1980 election. But a little recap here over Ronnie and a little bit of preview of what's to come. We'll pick it up with rebuilding the economy. So some of the domestic policies that are enacted by the Reagan administration and Congress at that time. And if it does or does not work, did it or did it not actually help things for the vast majority of Americans in the 1980s? We'll pick that up next time, but that does it with Ronald Reagan, this subsection right now. Later, kids.